There we go. I'm just going to leave it on. Okay. It's 1 o'clock and I'll call today's meeting to order. I'll start off with our land acknowledgement. The Town of Rocky Mountain House wishes to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Blackfoot, Cree, Saulteaux, Stoney, and Métis. I'll move on to item number 3.1, adoption of the agenda. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda? Aside? I have one. Under 8.2, under new business, council appointments to Parkland Regional Library Executive Committee and appointment to the Community Futures Board. We got that? Okay. Any other agendas? Additions?
I do have an addition to the agenda. I'm not sure where we'll put it under new business. Regionalized reopening from COVID.
Where do you want to put that then?
8.3. 8.3.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other additions? Seeing none, just a motion to accept as amended, please. Councillor Brown. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to our delegations. And we have a first delegation, 4.1, is for the FCM task force. And it's Mayor Morshida from Brooks. Welcome, Mayor Morshida.
Thank you for having me, Your Worship, and councillors of Rocky Mountain House. Thanks for the invitation.
That's great.
Did you want me to just get started and then I plan to have some time for questions, obviously, but I can quickly ramp through and then go from there?
Sure, that would be great, Mayor Morshida, if you just want to give your presentation and then we'll ask our questions after.
Sure.
Awesome.
So again, Barry Morshida, I'm the mayor of the city of Brooks, and I'm also the president of the AUMA. I'm also on the West Task Force, and I'm also the president of the Association Presidents for FCM. So just a brief history. So those of you that know, obviously, when the economic downturn hit, Western Canada, there were impacts to the entire country, and particularly kind of a lack of understanding about some of the issues that we're specifically dealing with in Western Canada around resources and resource development. So the West Task Force was formed. We report directly to the FCM executive, and as a result, the West is a standing item on the executive agenda and the board agenda from now until the end of its mandate. The mandate was originally scheduled to end this past fall, but it's been extended into the spring, although we're unsure really of when the mandate will end, depending on kind of some of the conclusion of some of the items that are out there. So I'm going to kind of get right into what the advocacy work plan and priorities are. So in the past, it was establishing initially some communications and having FCM advocate for some specific projects and specific initiatives for the West. So part of those advocacy items going forward are improving the federal impact assessment process, and I'll get into some details about what we're advocating for there. There's compensating farmers for the cost of the carbon tax on grain drying. There's the scaling up of the impact of Western Economic Diversification Canada. There's expanding the National Trade Corridor Fund and the Rail Safety Improvement Program. There's also an initiative to create a new energy transition community infrastructure fund for those communities that are impacted by transition from carbon economies, and also supporting the energy sector to reduce GHG emissions. West also undertook the initiative to be net zero by 2050. Be full disclosure, we don't understand exactly how that would work, but we know that it's a goal out there, and we do believe that it's something that puts us in alignment with not just federal priorities, but also world economic priorities when it comes to investment and things like that. So we've met with ministers. We've talked a lot about our initiatives going into budget. One of the things that we've recently done is advocated for. Maybe I'll just Maybe what I'll do is that'll help us get through this a little quicker. Is I'll just talk about the individual initiatives and what they mean for advocacy going forward. So the budget 2020 recommendations from West and through FCM are to one, expand the investments in Canada's trade and transportation infrastructure. And I'll give you some numbers that we're advocating for there. It's creating these new corridors and ensuring the new regional development agencies that are scheduled to open up for BC separately and the Prairie separately are adequately funded and meet municipal needs. So on the energy infrastructure, FCM and West issued a statement on the cancellation of Keystone XL. And while we were obviously extremely disappointed with the decision undertaken by the Biden government, that in no way stops some of the initiatives that we have for getting market access for Western resources. So one of the things we're advocating for is the conversation around national utility corridors that might pave the way for a smoother alternative to the constant consultation process that we have now. Coupled with that is some clarity on the impact assessment, which everybody knows is C69. So through a resolution from Strathcona County to FCM, there are a few things that FCM has adopted as a result of that. So one is to establish clear timelines and process during the early planning phase, so proponents understand what they're looking at. They want to eliminate the ministerial discretion on the approvals, which is currently in C69, because that would leads to some uncertainty for proponents of projects. We want to ensure that stakeholders that are most affected are given priority during public review panels. As it sits now, C69 is a bit wide open when it comes to who can testify or who can be part of the consultation. We want that prioritized. And we also want the impact of that agency increased to allow the ability for that agency to actually reach its mandate in the time required. So in C69, there are some the timelines are laid out, but we're concerned that they don't have enough resources to get that done. So on the trade and transportation infrastructure, we've asked for the National Corridors Fund to be increased by $1 billion a year over the next 3 years. And we've also asked for an extra $100 million to improve rail safety and rail crossings that allows the transportation of Western resources, both agricultural and traditional resource-based, to be transported to market. We've also asked about on the Western Economic Development budget. So in the past, the Western Economic Diversification Fund was significantly less than other ones in the country. And so now that they've created two, they're going to have a BC one and one for the prairies. We asked for those to be funded on at $1 billion over the next 5 years. And that would put us on par, equity with the other development agencies in the country, including Atlantic Canada. Some of the other things to diversify economies at the local level is the $150 million fund that was introduced for coal communities has not really been dispersed, and we were quite critical of that. And we discussed that with the minister responsible for Western issue, which is Jim Carr from Manitoba, that money hasn't rolled out in any significant way. And we've also asked for the same consideration for energy producing regions that through their need to diversify or lower GHG emissions do lose and have to diversify in another way, and that a fund be set up to help them out. Lastly, I'm going to just talk about what kind of some of the things that have happened. So the $1.7 billion that was awarded by the feds through the provinces to do well reclamation work. FCM advocated very hard for that. We also have on the agenda for FCM to advocate with the Natural Resources Minister as well as other members of Cabinet are the Bills C-69 and C-48, which are part of FCM's advocacy and have been adopted. I'm going to leave it at there. I will make one apology, and that is one of the things that we haven't done a great job at West is communicating to municipalities about what's going on. That hopefully is going to be dealt with in a little better way going forward. And for those of you that are contemplating some of the other issues that are out in Western Canada, I can confidently say that when I first started West, I was concerned about its effectiveness as well. But I can honestly say at this point in our mandate, and we still have a ways to go, that FCM centrally, and by centrally I mean in Ottawa, have taken up a lot of these positions that I don't think otherwise would have been recognized to the extent they are had West not been created. So I will turn it over to you, Your Worship, to moderate any questions.
Thanks for that presentation, Barry. I do have a couple of questions about your need to get the information out. However we can help you with that, please let us know. Is there a newsletter that we should be watching for, or any other communication?
So typically what's been happening is FCM has been centralizing those communications through their their regular communiques. We've asked for separate ones to be created so that we can highlight those. There certainly are national issues that I know members are involved in across the country, but clearly with the economic issues that are facing Western Canada now, particularly around the resource issue, we've asked for FCM to create a specific newsletter that talks about what's happening on that stage. So, then you'll understand, you'll get to see the meetings we're having, you'll get to see what's happening, what our budget advocacy is asking. You'll see that specifically from the West perspective, and hopefully that helps and helps get everybody a little bit more involved in the whole process.
Okay, that's great. And I agree with you, somehow separating it from the FCM, maybe even different colors or something like that, so we know it's specifically your task force that you're sitting on right now.
Yeah.
I just have one more question at this point on the well reclamation program. Is that fully up and running now?
So it depends who you ask. To be quite, we've from a local perspective here, right in Brooks, we've had some firms that have been awarded contracts to do some work. There's a sense of frustration that we got the last time we talked about this federally, because the provincial program has taken a little while to roll out. So one of the things we're hoping to do is update people on the actual amount of money that's gone out of that program in Alberta. So stay tuned for that. We're having some trouble gathering that information because we're going through, we have the, as you may or may not be aware, the federal-provincial relationship is not entirely good. And so they tend to use each other. I'm being completely transparent, as we should be. They like to use each other as a kind of boxing practice from time to time. So the feds say the money is there. The province says they've done the programs. So we're not quite sure why there is a delay, because it isn't gone as fast as it should, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Auld?
I was just curious, can you expand a little bit on that National Utilities Corridor? Have you seen any traction on that yet, or is that still just at initial stages?
Yeah, it's on initial stages. I don't know if you get the School of Public Policy newsletter from the University of Calgary, but they've done quite a bit of work on the utility corridor idea and what needs to be made to go. FCM saying, you got to get in a room with Indigenous people, municipalities, and the provinces and get started. And one of my pet peeves about all these processes is that, people seem to think that if you don't get it kind of all tied up in one bow, you can't make any progress. Well, I'm for one, don't think that. I think a country like ours, very rarely have we come up with a solution and laid it over and away it went. You know, it's always been incremental. It's always been kind of piece to piece, province to province. So, you know, I don't think we should wait for everybody to be on side. My effort would be if we can create a corridor in some areas to start with, we should go and do it. So I'm hoping that conversation starts quickly. There's enough data and information to have that conversation. And there's money set aside to create corridors of sorts, but there hasn't been the initiative specifically, and I think it would go a long way. So we're hopefully going to see something in the budget about this. That's one of the things we're hoping to see.
I have another question about the corridors. Have you heard of any Western corridors being promoted? I'm talking specifically House Pass or another corridor that would head sort of around Jasper out to Kitimat. Have you heard of those corridors?
I've read some work initially about possibilities, but I haven't seen anything tied up in a bow yet, Your Worship. I think right now what there has to be done is, in particularly when it comes to the Indigenous groups across the country, is they really have to be the first ones to say, hey, you know what? This makes, you know, they've got to be brought in and talk about it. It's going to go particularly, obviously, to the west. We have a lot of unceded territory. And if they're not part of the solution, it's just going to bog the process down. So I think there has to be some priorities put on things to get them going. I think industry will move to where they can move the things to, but we got to deal with the land issues, and the sooner we get started, the better off.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? No? I guess you've covered it all. Nobody has any other questions. So I really want to take this opportunity to thank you for making the time to come and give a presentation today. And we look forward to more information that the task force will send our way, and will help to promote it.
Thank you very much. And as you know, you have my contact information. If any counselors or anyone else is interested in contacting me directly about things, I'm more than happy to answer. So with that, I'll say so long, and good luck and good success with your council meeting today.
Great. Thanks very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Laura. So we will now move on to 4.2. We have another Zoom delegation, and it is with the Alberta Aerobatics Club. And so maybe I'll have everybody that's presenting just introduce themselves, if they would, please.
Sure. Let me share my screen.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon. Sorry, just Are you able to see my screen now?
No, we're not, Mr. Cook. I have given you authorization. It looks like we're coming into it now. There we are. Okay.
Got it.
I'm going to turn it back over to council. Thanks.
So good afternoon, council. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present. My name is Neil Cook, and I am the president of Aerobatics Alberta. So I'm a hangar owner at the Rocky Mountain House Airport. I built my hangar approximately 4 years ago. The aircraft that I fly is called a Sukhoi. It's a Russian-built aircraft designed for unlimited aerobatic competition. And I'm competing in the advanced category, which is the 4th out of 5 highest categories of competition. I reside in Calgary, Alberta, where I'm a professional engineer for the Canadian Natural Oil and Gas Company. And I'd like to next pass it on to Lenora to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Lenora Crean. I'm currently the president of Aerobatics Canada, which is our national association. I've been in aviation my entire life since I was 17 as a pilot, flight instructor, and a Transport Canada inspector for 25 years. I'm a current flight instructor and examiner for all forms of fixed wing flying and for aerobatics. And I do a little bit of recreational aerobatics myself, but mostly I support my husband, who is a competition advanced pilot who owns half an airplane that he keeps in Rocky Mountain House with a lady who lives in Rocky and owns the hangar.
Thanks, and hi everyone. My name's Jeff Seaborn. I've been flying for the last 15 years, but I've been around aviation most of my life. I am the chair of the EAA Canadian Council. EAA is the largest general aviation association in the world. It stands for Experimental Aircraft Association. There's something in the area of about 230,000 members, of which we have 6,500 in Canada. The airplane that I fly is called a DR-107. It's one that I built. It's a scratch build one that I had built, and competing in advanced. EAA is actually, I should mention, is a community of passionate aviators who are promoting and supporting recreational flying. Our mission is to grow participation in aviation, and whether it's competition aerobatics or just recreational flying, that is our mandate and goal. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you. So who is the Aerobatics Club of Alberta? So we're a nonprofit organization with approximately 30 members. We call the Rocky Mountain House Airport our home. So our club is built on three main pillars of safety, legal, and fun. So for safety, life is full of risks. Whether you're crossing the street, driving an automobile, or playing our national winter sport of hockey, everything has risk in life. However, we do these things in life because we love them, and they provide us with camaraderie, enjoyment, pride. And for aerobatics, for us, it's representing our country. So aerobatics is one of the safest motorsports due to being very structured with high amounts of training. Pilots are able to gain skill and understand how to control the aircraft in all envelopes of flight, which leads to enhanced safety. Our second core pillar is being legal. So Transport Canada has been involved throughout our organization, whether providing the special flight operating certificates, working with us as we host training camps, aerobatic competitions, and many Transport Canada officials have been also able to attend these events and audit them for safety and compliance. Our last and a significant point is also fun. So with any sport, enjoyment is key. We have good camaraderie amongst our group, as we are a like-minded group of people. We support each other through our skill development, competitions, and flying. And we're a friendly and approachable group. We invite the community out to our events, and we enjoy having them come out, watching us, and participating together. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Lenora for the next slide.
Hi. By definition, aerobatics is kind of boring. And most people, they associate aerobatics with air shows. Air shows are quite a bit different, or they're one part of aerobatics, but air shows are meant to be exciting and sensational and to look dangerous when they actually aren't. They're actually quite safe and highly regulated, but a lot of the stuff that you see at air shows is not aerobatics. Like the jet-powered outhouse going down the runway is not an aerobatic act. So there are a lot of other places where aerobatics comes in. All private and commercial pilots get a little bit of aerobatic training, whether they know it or not, when they're doing some of the maneuvers to get their licenses. The International Civil Aviation Organization recommends that all pilots at the commercial level get upset recovery, which is part of aerobatic training, and all pilots who fly high performance airplanes, like for airlines get upset recovery training, which is part of aerobatics. All right. Why do we learn aerobatics? To become safer pilots, to learn to recognize some of these unusual attitudes. If you're flying on an airliner, you hope that if it gets rolled upside down, your pilot can fix it, you guys. Proficiency, to become better, as Neil said, to be able to fly the airplane in all forms of flight. For fun, for competition. This is like golf. Some people just golf, or I call it gloff their way down the fairways for fun. Other people, they golf for money and they golf for competition. It's much the same with aerobatics. And camaraderie, it's a place where everybody can get together and people can volunteer, and talk about flying in different ways, hang around the airport. Alrighty, so I have this one story I'm going to tell. Who does aerobatics? One of the members of our club, he's about 70 now. He was an accountant for I think it was a pulp and paper company out on the West Coast. And one day the chief pilot for their flight division came in and said, "You don't like doing this. Why don't you come fly for us?" And he did. He'd been in competition aerobatics and, worked his way through flying school and stuff while he was being an accountant. And he had to go fly a jet. And so they send you down to simulator training in the States. And this particular jet, it had an accident where the airplane started to roll and they couldn't fix it. And it rolled upside down into the ground on its approach into a runway in the States. So everybody who was trained in the simulator, they simulated this accident and everybody died in the simulator. And so they were proving the point that if this happens to you, you can't control it, until they got to our friend who was the competition aerobatic pilot. And he flew away from it until his co-pilot was able to fix the problem. And he survived. And that was one of the things that started the necessary training for upset recovery for pilots, were accidents where they realized that the aerobatic pilots were actually surviving some of these things and the other pilots weren't. So there is some training, and so all pilots do a little bit of it. It is recommended by ICAO that all commercial pilots have some aerobatic training. Airline pilots, it's mandatory. And then there's people who do it for fun and people who do it for competition. Okay, Neil.
Thanks, Lenore. So what does the Alberta Aerobatic Club do? So as Lenore alluded to, numerous members of the Aerobatic Club are business owners, engineers, professional pilots, and flight instructors. And some of them are quite accomplished flight instructors who now do commercial license ratings and aerobatic training as well. We also do a substantial amount of education. So we host a judges school yearly. This is the training that allows judges to understand aerobatic flight, the rules, the regulations, and what is required to put on a successful competition. We also are able to provide numerous seminars for flying schools regarding upset training and aerobatics, emphasizing improved flight safety and ongoing aerobatic flight training. We're also privileged to have a large amount of women within our club membership. So 1/3 of the Alberta Aerobatic Club membership are female. And they've been able to do such things as having a booth at the Women in Aviation event to promote women becoming more involved in aviation and aerobatics in general. So competitions is a large part of the Aerobatic Club of Alberta. We host typically 3 competitions yearly, 2 in Alberta and 1 in the US. The 2 in Alberta are at Rocky Mountain House and Killam Sedgwick. The one in the States is at Cutbank, Montana. And we're also really privileged to have some very high profile members who not only train out of Rocky, they're based in Rocky. So these 2 aerobatic club members have gone on to compete at the world level at not only the advanced aerobatic world competition, but also the unlimited world aerobatic competition, where countries from France, Russia, all send the best of their best pilots to compete against the other countries. Significantly, we volunteer a lot. We volunteer directly at the Rocky Mountain House Airport. We volunteer for the Rocky Mountain House Air Show. Lenore's husband, Miles, and myself were able to put on a Scotch tasting event for all of the air show volunteers. We've been able to have information booths at the Rocky Mountain House Air Show, pancake breakfasts in Calgary at the Calgary Flying Club. And we also support other general aviation events throughout the province. And even online now with COVID, just a few days ago on February 28th, we were able to have an engine seminar, which we invited members of the Rocky Mountain House Flying Club to as well. And then we just do regular other social activities, as most clubs do, including barbecues, regular monthly meetings. And we've also been able to do awareness events where we've been able to provide aerobatic rides to the public. And I'll pass it back to Jeff.
This is me, I guess.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. So aerobatic competitions, as Neil said, we have, and over the last few years on the long weekend in September, ran a competition in Rocky Mountain House. The aerobatic competitions are actually sanctioned by the, the Olympic Committee through the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, which is the governing body of air sports in the world. And believe it or not, I think it was 1936, aerobatics was actually showcased at the Olympics, and then World War II broke out and we haven't been invited back, although we do put our name in to be a sport when they are allowing new sports to come up, and we got beat out in the last one by skateboarding, believe it or not. So they are quite heavily regulated, all our aerobatic competitions. In order to run one in Canada, you have to have Transport Canada approval. We actually run to a higher standard than what Transport Canada requires. The International Aerobatic Club rules are what we follow. And for example, the IAC requires that we do an airplane inspection prior to the contest. Transport Canada doesn't. So we there's several layers of safety and sanctioning. There are 5 levels from primary, which is the beginner who does 5 maneuvers that are all pretty easy, to the unlimited, which are pretty complicated, and intermediate and unlimited are world events. And so competitions that are sanctioned by the World Organization are done at both the advanced and the unlimited level. And we've talked a little bit about judging. A resty is that nomenclature that you see there that describes an aerobatic sequence. Go ahead, Neil. Where do aerobatics happen? In uncontrolled airspace, close to a few airports that aren't as busy as others. We've been practicing at Rocky Mountain House for quite some time. We do have members who practice at other airports as well. There's at least one other airport in Canada that is designated like Rocky Mountain House in the Canada Flight Supplement, the book that describes all the airports in Canada. That's Fort St. John. There aren't a lot of serious competition aerobatic pilots, so it isn't something that happens everywhere continuously. There are 4 schools in Alberta that teach people aerobatics, and those schools, they practice in the training areas that are designated training areas for the school. And the training that goes on in those areas is all kinds of aviation training, including aerobatics. So it's not specifically designated as aerobatic airspace at those airports. All right, aerobatic box, I think. Thanks. So an aerobatic box is something that's used for competition. And the at a competition, the aerobatic competitor must stay within this box. And in order to be good at competition, you pretty much need to have a box to practice in somewhere. So we have some markings on the ground at Rocky Mountain House that we've used over the years for our competition pilots to practice in the box. And it's basically a kilometer cubed. I don't know, let's see if there's anything else there. It's another thing that's important for competition aerobatics is to be watched and critiqued. It's virtually impossible to improve. As I'm a certified national judge for aerobatics, and we watch from the ground and we base the marks that you get in the competition on what we see from the ground. Without binoculars, it is the naked eye, me with glasses on, that is watching the aerobatic pilots. So the competition pilots, in order to improve, want a judge to watch them in their practice. So this is the advantage of having a box that's somewhere where you can watch closely and you can critique the airplane when they come down so that they can improve in order to represent Canada in world events and to improve enough that we can have an Olympic team in the next few years. Anything there, Neil, that you want to add?
Nope, that's great. Thanks, Lenora. So benefits of the Alberta Aerobatics Club. So the first one up here is world level representation. So we've been fortunate, as previously described, to have 2 members from the Alberta Aerobatics Club who are based in Rocky Mountain House to represent Canada on the world level at the advanced and unlimited competitions. We also have 5 members currently based at Rocky Mountain House, myself included, who are training to attend the World Advanced Aerobatic Competition that will be held in Las Vegas in 2023. The team would represent it would represent 10 total pilots. 8 would be who are competing and 2 that would be backup. We also need lots of support from numerous volunteers, family, friends, coaches. The Alberta Aerobatic Club is expecting to make approximately half of the numbers on the Canadian Advanced World Team. So we also have numerous aerobatic competition pilots who do air shows throughout Canada and the USA. Some of these members have had significant representation on YouTube and other information channels. And they're members and ambassadors of Aerobatics Canada, the town of Rocky Mountain House, the airport, Clearwater County, and Canada as a whole. We also attend quite a few local aviation events. They're not aerobatic, but they do involve us and the rest of the general aviation community. So we feel we play a significant part in being ambassadors for the town of Rocky Mountain House, representing the pride that we have for the town, the community, and the airport that we represent. And I guess to draw attention to the top of the slide there, we literally put the sticker on our airplanes that we're proud to be based at Rocky Mountain House. It does mean a lot to us. So other benefits of the Alberta Aerobatics Club, we're heavily invested in the airport and the surrounding community. So currently there's 8 hangars owned by members of the Alberta Aerobatics Club. I've estimated the value of those hangars at approximately 1.5 million. So this is approximately, I believe there's 24 hangars built at the Rocky Mountain House Airport. So we're approximately a third. If you take out the hangars that are not used for aviation, on the taxiway that I'm currently on, 3 out of the 6 hangars are not used for aviation. And there's a couple more that I know about as well. They don't have airplanes in those hangars. So really, when you look at the demographic of the airport, we're approximately 50% of the utilized hangars for aviation. And then one of our members of the Alberta Aerobatics Club also is heavily invested in the airport. providing a critical service with the fuel system. The airport would be very challenged to continue running without the fuel system. He does provide a critical service just for general traffic. You know, there's air ambulances that come in and out, helicopters, fighting forest fires, search and rescue. It's a very important business to have local in Rocky Mountain House. And then additional benefits of the Alberta Aerobatics Club, just general investment in the community. So we've had members move to Rocky Mountain House to live there. We've had members like myself from Calgary who have specifically built hangars or purchased them at Rocky Mountain House, due alone to being able to practice there. We're also heavily invested in the outgoing community. The community receives revenue from the leases that we pay, the taxes, the fuel surcharge that our airplanes burn. And we spend quite a bit of money in the local community as well. We support local businesses. We stay at the hotels in town when we're there. We buy food at the local restaurants, co-op, and we utilize services such as home hardware in the developments of our hangars. And then the last point is we're heavily involved in the community. We invite the ongoing Rocky Mountain House community out to our aviation events such as competitions. They're completely free, and we love being ambassadors for the support, or giving support and contribution back to the community.
Thanks, Neil. One of the greatest contributions the Alberta Aerobatic Club provides is actual constant activity at the airfield. Both personally and flying across the country as part of my role in the EAA Canadian Council, I've gotten to fly to countless places across Canada and also in the northern US. And I find stopping at various airfields, you quickly get a sense of the activity and engagement in the community. And sadly, many of the airfields out there have minimal activity, and you can feel it. And if you go into an airfield and you go into the terminal building, they have a logbook for transitioning airplanes to and pilots to sign. And many times there's cases where the entries that have been put in the logbook, the most recent ones are weeks or even months old, suggesting that there hasn't been a lot of activity coming through there. And you know, that's really sad. And I think it contributes to an overall decay in the community. That minimal activity certainly becomes decay, and once it goes beyond that, it can become abandoned. On the flip side of it, though, activity, it's part of a big flywheel, and activity encourages activity. And what I mean by that is that when you've got activity like the Alberta Aerobatic Club has out at Rocky, it encourages, it creates enthusiasm, it creates awareness, builds confidence in the facility. And that confidence in the facility is confidence in its availability. And with that, that means others will start to locate there. People will move their airplanes there. They feel there's a great community and that there's a solid environment to which they can store their airplane, fly out of, and have the facilities for it. So many will build there. And with that becomes excellent growth. And that growth, it also encourages further opportunities like aviation businesses that might invest there, that might start up there. And that just contributes again to the flywheel effect. With more investment becomes more activity. And it's really critical to a community to see that. The aviation community does take a lot of pounding from different areas. And without that support of the community, the local community, it can be lost quickly. Next slide, please, Neil. This is kind of a sad slide, actually, because it's the opposite of what would happen if you lost that activity and lost that that growth. And it happens quickly, but very quietly. And no one's going to say, hey, things are starting to fall apart, things are starting to move out. It just happens quietly. And as things decay, that confidence in the community decreases, pardon me. pilots move their planes away or stop flying there. They stop buying fuel, they stop renting, maybe they stop flying altogether. And as this happens, decay accelerates and hangars are emptied or become abandoned. Seen that in countless places, and it's quite a sad sight. You know, the other side of it too is a lot of the times the hangars become used for something other than aircraft, and that's a real shame too. You've got a phenomenal investment in an airfield, and if people aren't using it for an airfield, then it starts getting storage for people's junk. And as people's junk gets left there, sometimes it gets left outside, and again, it becomes an eyesore, becomes more decay, and it quickly accelerates into what becomes an abandoned airfield. These pictures that I've shown here, they're not from anywhere local. I didn't want to show anywhere local because at the risk of insulting any of the airfields that might have a plan to re-engage with their community. But these are ones that have been either shut down or completely abandoned. The bottom left one is an aerial shot of an airfield that's now storing just old rusted farm equipment. The airfield itself has been shut down, and it's a real shame. It becomes a liability versus actually keeping the investment of an airfield in the community and that valuable part in the community's infrastructure. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Jeff. And that concludes our presentation. If we could open it up to questions, that'd be great. I'll stop sharing my slides so I can get a bigger Zoom picture of everyone. That's all right?
Sure, that sounds great. I'll just start by saying all of us have also watched the presentation that you did to County Council last week, and so we may have questions regarding that presentation as well, just so you're aware. I have a couple that I'll start out with. I'm just curious to know, is there aerobatic flight instruction and seminars happening out at our airport currently?
The short answer to that is no.
Okay.
There's no current flight instruction. There has been companies come in running satellite schools previously, and there's currently no aerobatic training going on at the airport.
Okay. And how many club aircraft currently would you say that are on the airfield right now?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't know specifically how many who's there right now.
Okay. I know others have some questions, so I'm okay. Sorry,
Okay,
go
keep
ahead.
asking questions and I'll think about that one.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, the first question
Your
I have
mic.
is a two-parter. Is a two-parter. So there's approximately 30 AAC members here, or at least in the club. How many club members are pilots?
I'd say approximately half of them are pilots.
So approximately 15 are pilots.
Yeah.
Okay,
Our
and of
membership
those,
is also growing.
of those 15 pilots, how many hold a personal SFOC?
I don't have that count for you off the top of my head.
Could you get that information for us at some point in time, please? Okay.
Do you want that SFOC count at Rocky Mountain House? Because that's currently 0.
Okay,
Or
so
would you like that count relative to other airports in the surrounding community?
no, of your club specifically, and you've already given us the Rocky Mountain House number. So
Yeah, the Rocky Mountain House number now is 0 because we were told that prior permission that was granted is no longer in effect.
Can I talk about SFOCs just for a minute?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the special flight authority that's given to individuals is granted for one place initially. So you have to have somebody, and it can be a farmer who says, you can fly over top of my farm. And with that, you're granted a special flight authorization that allows you to go to any other place in Canada that gives you permission to fly over their land with that SFOC. So it's not site specific. It's not intended to be site specific. It is, but in order to obtain it, you need a place to give you original authority. So for example, Neil's dad is a big farmer in Saskatchewan, and Neil could get his SFOC by saying, Dad, can you write me a letter saying that I can do aerobatics over the farm? Okay. So we don't, in our group, we do this on trust. We know sort of who has one, but they don't have to tell us if they have one or not. If they apply for one, it doesn't go through the aerobatic club. The application, it goes from the individual directly to Transport Canada.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Auld, and then I'll come back.
I just have a question regarding that. Are those FSOCs, are they not time specific? They may not be location, but they're time specific?
They're usually issued for 2 years, but originally they were issued for life. So there are grandfathered ones out there that people were given them for life. And anybody who's got one in about the last 10 years, it was for 2 years. And then they renew them every 2 years. And when you renew it, you don't have to use the same spot that you used the first time, but most of the time people do.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this side? No? Councillor Brown?
Hey, Mr. Seaborn talked about growth. Other pilots have stated that traffic into, from, or through the area has decreased since aerobatics has grown at CYRM. While itinerant pilots seem to stay clear, the group that is staying away the most, from what I am hearing, seems to be commercial aviation. The small businesses that are flying small numbers of tourists in and out of CYRM, or other small aviation businesses who might want to relocate here. Because of our proximity to the West Country and our central Alberta location, what thought have AAC given to the loss of that traffic and what it'll mean to this community?
Sure. I guess I don't know whose statement that is, or how the basis of that fact is derived. Do you have any more information on how that's attained?
That comment is made in this conversations that we've had with pilots, or pilots have had with us, and it's being asked specifically because you, at the county presentation, threw out some pretty impressive numbers without any real substantiation or no presentation of documentation that say those numbers are credible.
Okay, which number is that referring to?
When you talk to the county, your valuation of what the AAC meant to CYRM.
Yeah, so I made the same numbers in this presentation. So the Hainer value that we've invested in the community is $1.5 million. And the fuel system, I don't know what it's worth, but I suspect that puts us into the multiple millions of dollars invested in the community. I personally have never heard any complaints from any kind of commercial businesses flying in and out of Rocky Mountain House. I've talked to the owners of Alstrom Air. They provide no concern at all. In fact, they're extremely supportive of the Alberta Aerobatic Club. We also have 2 letters in from Conair and Airspray, who run the tanker base and fly consistently out of Rocky Mountain House, and they are both in support of aerobatics below 2,000 feet continuing at the airport. So the primary businesses currently at the airport have zero issue.
I'd also like to add that I work with most of the flying schools in Southern Alberta, and none of them are intimidated for sending their students on cross countries to Rocky Mountain House. That's still ongoing and has been for years.
And I guess to the point of the documentation, I myself am not going to PDF and photocopy any of my flying records and put them into a public document or report of any kind. That's absolutely foolish to do. And anybody that's recommending to do that, it's a foolish statement to make. So I understand the email that you're deriving this question from, and it's not nobody's going to personally do that.
Okay. So I'm looking for other questions. Councillor Fraser?
So I don't think anyone here wants to make things more difficult for any of the users, but we do have to provide a safe and legal experience for all of the users at the airport. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that many airports have practice areas, but not right over the airport and the runway. And the concerns that have been brought forward to me are the issues with having that kind of activity directly over the airfield. And my question to you is there a compromise where that box could be moved somewhere that there could still be an area for you guys to practice, and those with the SFOCs can do what those regulations say you can do, but it's not directly over the airfield?
Can I address that one, part of it?
Sure.
And I'm sorry, I dropped out for about 5 minutes there. I lost internet connection. So if there were any questions directly aimed at me, I apologize, I missed them. But to that point, I fly just southeast of Calgary at a little grass strip called Indus, CFY4, and it's just under the Calgary airspace. It's 15 minutes from my home. It's convenient for me, which is why I'm based there. But because of its proximity to the international airspace or international airport, I can't do aerobatics. Even though I have permission from the airport owner, I can't get my full height of aerobatics and stay outside of the international airspace or Calgary International Airspace. So I have to fly about 10 miles away from the airfield to a spot that's over some farmland that I have permission from the farm owners to do my aerobatics. I can go down as low as my SFOC allows. I can go all the way up to 8,000 feet before I get into YYC, or Calgary's airspace. I've been practicing there for about 5 years, and I do all the procedures that I can to let people know that I'm flying there. You transmit on a radio frequency of 126.7 when you're flying in uncontrolled airspace. I also transmit on the frequency for the local airfield, that being Indus. And every few minutes, I make a call that says aircraft in the area of this, and I give my specific locations, and I say I'm doing some upper air work, which is the term used for aerobatics, for this time for over the next few minutes. And in those 5 years, I know of 2 situations where transient aircraft flew through the box while I was doing aerobatics. Those were 2 cases that I knew of. And I actually even have one just from last summer where a plane was coming through while I was going, pulling a vertical maneuver, and a plane flew right over me, got a beautiful image of it on my GoPro. And, that's the risk of flying outside and away from an airfield. People don't have to be on a certain radio frequency or paying attention when they're outside of the airfield location. By being at the airfield, that is a huge advantage for both the safety of the transient aircraft, the incoming aircraft, the outgoing aircraft, and the aerobatic pilots who are flying there, because they are on what's known as a mandatory frequency. To fly in and out of Rocky, you have to be on a mandatory frequency. You also have to refer to it, the Canadian Flight Supplement, prior to flying anywhere. You look in the flight supplement to see what activities and what risks are. For example, in Rocky, you're not supposed to do your circuit over the town. There are certain procedures, and having it at an airport is actually a significant advantage of safety for a lot of reasons. Not to mention the fact that if there is an engine issue or an aircraft issue while you're doing your aerobatic maneuvers, having that runway right nearby right where you can set down is a huge safety advantage.
The other point too is when you are flying aerobatics and you say you're at the Rocky Mountain House Airport, the incoming airplane knows exactly where you are. Like Jeff, I used to be based out of Old Didsbury, and I used to do aerobatics over the person that I was in the hangar with. He has a section of land just west of the airport, and it was the scariest place to do aerobatics. There's so much traffic coming in between local airports there. When you say I'm 5 miles west of an airport, who knows where that exactly is? And so, and then the other point, like Jeff said, they don't have to be on any traffic frequency at all. They could be talking to Joe Blow on their cell phone as they fly along. So having a mandatory frequency, knowing exactly where the other aircraft is completely advantageous for both parties involved. And the same challenge still arises with airplanes not doing aerobatics at Rocky. So if you leave from Edmonton and I leave from Calgary and we're both going to Rocky Mountain House, what stops the two airplanes from colliding over the airport? The answer is the mandatory frequency. Both aircraft are talking to each other. It's no different with aerobatics.
Councillor Fraser, did you have something to?
And I'd like to just put in a comment or two about, there are many airports in Alberta and across Canada where there is a mix of activities. Okay, so like for example, at Bicycle, they have all kinds of regular airplane traffic and school traffic coming and going from there, but they have a skydiving operation that operates right over top of the airport. There are several drop zones right over top of airports in Alberta and across Canada. There are also quite a few glider clubs that operate at airports that have fixed wing operations as well at that operation. So at these airports, what happens is if there's good communication, everybody can get along and share. And there is no reason why the activities can't be diverse at an airport.
Okay, I have Councillor Fraser was going to finish up that thought. Is that?
It was just a follow-up. If it provides all of the extra benefits, do you have names of other Canadian airports that have the same aerobatic activity over, just so we could, I guess, compare?
You want me to do that, Neil?
Yes, please.
Okay, so in Alberta, we currently have permission to practice at Drumheller and Ponoka. One of our members has permission to practice at Bicycle. If you look in the flight supplement, it states that there is aerobatics over Fort St. John in BC. Other members practice at Abbotsford, BC. There is a box at Villeneuve, which it gets used by some of our members practicing in the control zone. We have a member who practices he does his air show routine out at Bassano and teaches formation out of Bassano. Where else? Now,
Killam Sedgwick is another one.
Killam Sedgwick allow us to practice there, and we have a contest there. What's that?
We have another member that has an SFOC for at Bicycle, where they also do parachuting.
Yeah, so he practices there while the parachutists are jumping. And in Ontario, I know that they practice at Hanover and at least a couple other places, but I'm not sure which airports that they practice at. Our members, we have some members in Manitoba that fly over Steinbeck, Manitoba. Then I'm not sure where else they fly in Manitoba. I don't know of any members in Saskatchewan right now.
Okay,
So,
I think that's good. Thanks for that, Lenore. I have Councillor Brown and then Councillor Narang.
Okay, in response to the listing of all the airports that allow aerobatics, of those airports and aerodromes that you listed, do they all allow random aerobatics below 2,000 feet AGL over their airfields?
define random.
Unscheduled. Whenever
I don't know
you
about
please.
all of them, but some of them definitely do that. Members hold SFOCs.
So, and that's, they can basically do low-level aerobatics whenever they choose,
Correct.
and
So-
that's to the ground,
Yeah,
Whatever their SFOC allows.
okay? And just a comment on flight supplements. Who makes the entries into the flight supplements that reference aerobatics?
airport manager.
Thank you.
Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I have two questions. One I probably should know the answer to, but is there a cost that clubs pay to use airports for, say, your home base or for when you're coming to practice? Is there a fee, like a user fee that's involved in that?
Can I answer that?
Go for it.
In some airfields, there are landing fees or user fees over and above the hangar fees or the fuel charges, of course. You want to kill an airport, charge landing fees. That is the quickest way to kill an airport and shut it down. You will stop transient aircraft. You will stop people who are practicing there. Students who do training, any pilot that goes through training, you're doing touch and goes. You're practicing your landings. You're practicing your takeoffs. You might do at a busy airfield, you might do a couple of touch and goes in an hour. So the students would often go to a less busy airfield and might do 5 or 6 or 10 touch and goes in an hour. If each of those touch and goes are charged to $10 at a time or $15 at a time, no one's going to do it there anymore. And I can think of many places in Alberta which have seen minimal or reductions of traffic because of those risks of landing fees.
So as a club,
Maybe-
there's no charge though? Sorry?
So as a club, there is no specific charge.
Okay.
Maybe I can answer that question a different way. The way our club actually pays back and provides value to the community is volunteering. So a large number of our aerobatic club members put on the Rocky Mountain House Air Show and actually participate and fly in it as well. So the way we provide value to the community is involvement and volunteering.
Okay, Councillor Narang, did you have another?
Just going back to the talking about the SFOCs, who's responsible outside of just the pilots to know that those exist? Like, is there a liability then towards the airport if somebody is participating in aerobatics and doesn't possess that SFOC? So who is responsible to know that those exist outside of just the pilot saying that they have it?
So
That's
it would,
it?
well, partially that's it. So Transport Canada is involved in the whole process of obtaining the SFOC. And there also has to be involvement within the operating manager of the airport. So that's currently what we do not have anymore at Rocky Mountain House.
Sorry, can you just clarify? It's the manager of the airport that knows who has the SFOCs.
He has to grant permission for us to fly below 2,000 feet.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
And that goes for anywhere that you fly. If you are, for example, in my case, southeast to Calgary, I'm not flying over the airfield, but I do have permission from the property owners and the surrounding property owners to do my aerobatics over their property. And that's part of the SFOC process. You have to get that permission.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yes, just in reference to the slide that mentioned taxes and leases, what kind of contribution of those taxes goes to the town of Rocky Mountain House?
I'm not sure. That's between you guys and Clearwater County, I believe. That's not an Aerobatic Alberta question, I'm afraid. I can't answer that.
Your Worship, I can answer Council Brown's question. Actually, 0 taxes generated from the airport come to the town of Rocky Mountain House.
I have a question about the box. Who maintains the box? Because there is a very distinct outline, and who maintains that?
So originally, it was Chevaliers that were able to cut in the box. was it 2 years back, we did maintenance on the box markers. So we went out, inspected every single box marker, repainted them, improved them, mowed the grass around them. So the Alberta Aerobatics Club does maintain essentially the box that is there.
The Aerobatic Club does.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And one question on incidents or near misses. How are those recorded with your club?
We don't record any incidents and misses. I have not been made aware of any that have happened.
Would that be standard practice or not really at other airports?
Well, I'd assume it would be up to the airport manager to be involved with that type of stuff and potentially communicating and relaying it to myself.
Okay.
Yeah. I can probably talk to that a little bit. I can't count the number of near misses that I've had in my 45 years of flying. It's something that you hope never happens, but it does. And it's not something that you report unless it happens to be something, the other airplane is doing something illegal or whatever. But the fact that you're looking out the window and somebody comes up at you when you glance down at your kneeboard or your map or whatever, and they fly by too close, which you would count as a near miss, doesn't get reported.
Okay, thank you. I have Mr. Kraus has something here.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So just a question. So for the permission for the SFOC, it's the airport manager, like you say, but the box at the Rocky Airport actually goes off airport property onto Crown land, which is a grazing lease. So do you need permission from that property owner too?
Correct, we do. That permission was lined through, or was obtained with Ken Fowler's assistant from the owner of the property to the north of the box.
So if it's a Crown grazing lease land, do you need permission from the Crown then too?
I'm not sure. Mr. Fowler made those arrangements for us.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No? So I just have one more, and are you prepared as a group to go to Transport Canada to get a special event SFOC to be able to practice here and on scheduled times?
We have in the past, yes. So anytime we've had a competition, we have gone to Transport Canada to obtain all the necessary event requirements. Maybe Lenora, you want to take that on more?
I mean, yes, you can get an SFOC for practice days.
The challenge with that though is the paperwork is challenging. Like there's a lot of paperwork, and there's also paperwork required for the town of Rocky Mountain House, Clearwater County, insurance. Everybody has to submit paperwork to have an event SFOC.
So if there was a regular, say, scheduled time, 1-2 times a week or something like that, reoccurring, could you get that type of a certificate that would last for, say, 6 months before having to renew?
We'd have to talk to the Transport Canada guy and see. So, and see what they would allow us. They might make us do one for every single one, and they might give us one that's repeating. I doubt that they would give us one for repeating, like for the whole season. It's so there are other things that have to be in place for that, right? Mm-hmm. So if like we would have to have fencing up every single time to restrain the crowd. There would be
special NOTAMs put out with Transport Canada.
Yeah, there would be NOTAMs put out for every single one of those. I mean, it could be done, but I'm not sure that the airport would like it after it was done.
And also in the best interest of Aerobatics Alberta, we have to go to that level of paperwork, safety? Documentation. No, not safety. It doesn't improve safety.
Okay.
We may as well go to other airports in the community So we've already approached numerous other airports that have welcomed us with open arms to start hosting practice days, training, competitions at their airports.
Okay. Can you say, like, will they be requiring any of those safety measures or not? Or
It depends on the event that we're hosting. Numerous airports for just random practice do not require it. For something like a competition, we do require it.
Okay. Thank you. I
think the other thing about practice days that becomes a challenge, of course, aviation is so weather dependent. And it would be nice to say Wednesday, the third Wednesday of April is going to be a beautiful day. Let's plan to have a practice day that day. We just don't know. So for a lot of us to be able to have the flexibility to practice when the opportunity arises, both in our schedule and in the weather environment, is certainly incredibly valuable.
Okay, thanks for that.
We've also presented other suggestions for improving safety at the airport, like the Canadian Flight Supplemental. The diagram of the airport could have the aerobatic box directly labeled and shown on it. Things like that. We could change potentially the traffic pattern at the airport. It's already got a caution advisory about aerobatic activity, but if it showed the box, people would know exactly where that aircraft is. We've tried to have some of these discussions, and unfortunately, we've been waiting for a report to come out that's going to then allow us to have input at that point in time.
Yes, and that report is coming out shortly. So I had Councillor Narang and then Councillor Brown before we wrap up here.
Actually, you gave me a new question, Neil. You talked about rerouting airport traffic. That's what you said?
I don't know what you mean by rerouting.
I think I'm using the wrong word, but just in your last statement there, when you were talking about improving the safety, you talked about.
Oh, the traffic pattern?
Yeah. Sorry, that's the word. Can you explain to me what you mean by that?
Well, it just would show the potential, like the circuit to be around the aerobatic box, or lots of airports have the traffic circuit on just one side of the airport. Just ideas like that. I don't know the right answer, but just ideas shooting from the hip of potential changes that could be made.
Okay, the only reason I asked is I thought it was standard. There was a standard flight pattern at all airports. Is that correct?
It's not completely standard, no.
Oh, okay.
No, there are options for that, and it depends on the type of airspace and where we have what's called a mandatory frequency, which is not completely uncontrolled. So there are some differences at different airports. A large number of airports have the circuits only on one side of the airport, not on both sides. Bassano and Bicycle both have their circuits only on one side of the airport to accommodate the activity of the skydivers or the aerobatics or other things, right? So it can't, there are some variations there. And as a group, we'd really like to meet with the other users of the airport and discuss these possibilities. This is not the right forum for discussing the possibilities for those kinds of rules or changes. I think all of the users of the airport need to be involved in those decisions.
And that's exactly what will happen when that report comes out and we have a dialogue, so that we will continue this dialogue around then. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, just a question or two on identifying the box and flight supplements. Who's responsible for identifying it in the supplements?
Again, that's the airport manager.
Okay, so the airport manager. So why hasn't it been identified in the flight supplements before?
We, at the Rocky Flying Club meeting, I think it was in October, and the new airport manager was there, we had a discussion about the possibility of, like, the Aerobatic Club wanted to do some advertising and educational advertising, put up posters with what the procedures at this airport should be and so that, and we had been in discussions with Ken Fowler before about that, about what can we put in our education so that we can go to the flying schools and to the other airports and let all the groups know about what's happening at Rocky Mountain House. And so unfortunately, when Ken passed, those discussions dropped, and we tried to, with the at the Rocky Flying Club meeting, we tried to approach the possibility of getting back into what would be good. And we had Kelly Gosson, one of our members who also owns quite a few hangars at the airport, was at the end of that meeting was supposed to be meeting with John McFadden about discussing what procedures should be used. And a few days later, an email came out from John saying that he didn't support any aerobatics at the airport. So nothing's happened since then.
Yeah, well, I should have been a little clear, so I apologize for that. But when I talk about why wasn't it done before, aerobatics has been in this area for decades, as I'm told. Mr. Fowler was airport manager for decades, so why wasn't the box identified decades ago?
Unfortunately, that's you guys and your airport manager, not something that we know the answer to.
Well, again, I mean, Mr. Fowler was part of the aerobatics club, and
No, he
he was
wasn't,
the airport
actually.
manager at the time. So, you know,
Mr. Fowler has never been a member of the Alberta Aerobatics Club directly as long as I've been president.
okay, my mistake on that one.
Okay.
But if he's been the airport manager, he's responsible for completing flight supplement information. You've had a relationship with the airport and that airport manager for decades. I'm just curious why it wasn't accomplished previously.
I think the quick answer to that is everything we were doing previously had worked extremely well. When planes come in, we talk to them on the radio, and there's not any major problems that have typically ever happened. I think currently now some of the scale of what is assumed to be problematic is blown up dramatically and probably not correctly.
Okay.
So in the Canadian Flight Supplemental, it does have a cautionary that extensive aerobatic activity is overhead the airport extending to 1 nautical mile east of the runway. So there already is a permanent NOTAM in the Canadian Flight Supplemental about the aerobatics that goes on at Rocky Mountain House, and that was deemed sufficient.
Okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Kraus, when is the report going to be released?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the first draft was done and sent over to Clearwater County. They came back with comments and suggestions. So we have revised the report with that in consideration. That report went to Clearwater County yesterday for another review by them. I've asked them to have their comments to us by Friday if possible. Then once we have their comments back, we will be able to release it to the group.
Okay, so we'll look for this report soon, and then after that report is released, we will then venture to have a open house, like a public engagement session, and get everybody's feedback at that time as well. So has everybody had their chance to ask their questions? Okay. So I want to thank you for your presentation. It was very educational. And thank you for your comments. And we look forward to your comments regarding the report as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. (2:23), I'm going to call a 5-minute break.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I was getting worked up.
I was- okay.
We are still live until we get the live stream stuff.
Okay.
Just for your information.
Thank you.
That's probably